History Lesson Live. I'm Jason. I don't usually do this, Inman.
I am Ashley Victoria Robinson.
Yes, and we have a very special guest, the lovely, the amazing Trisha Hershberger.
Hi, guys.
I'm going to call you a tech, gaming, entertainment creator, gamer, Jessica Rabbit extraordinaire.
Wizard.
That's fair. That's fair.
Sure, I'll take it. I always, it's funny whenever people have me on shows and they're like, can you tell us what you do? I'm like, well, I make videos on the internet. It is very funny. Mostly I do, now the way I've condensed it is gaming, tech, and like geek lifestyle and entertainment is kind of, which it's so weird because the word geek is now interpreted so many different ways, and like geek and nerd means so many different things than they used to. And if you talk to Comic-Con as of last year, they called it the celebration of the popular arts. So I'm like, but if I say I cover pop culture, people will think I mean Kim Kardashian or Cardi B. So it's like, I don't know. It's very weird to say. I talk about sci-fi, fantasy, tech, and gaming for the most part. That's the TLDR.
Yes, and
totally.
and since this is the kickoff of our Geek History Lesson Summer Movie Club, where we're going to celebrate anniversaries of movies. This is the 5th anniversary of Star Wars: The Force Awakens, Star Wars Episode 7, whatever you want to call it. The one with BB-8, whatever you want to call it. Since you're so into tech, we thought this was the perfect time to pull you in to explain all the things of a galaxy far, far away. Now, everybody out there, we want to say that everybody watching live right now, we will have a Q&A section at the very end. But if you have a super important question that you need to get our answers on right this minute, you, of course, always use a super chat. And if you're watching this on Facebook Live, you're going to have to go over to YouTube to watch us on Super Chat. All right, so let's go into the first section of our podcast, the 10-cent origin. Ashley, if you would, please explain to Trisha and the lovely audience what that is.
Well, Trisha's been here before, so she knows what's up. The 10-cent origin is the first part of the podcast where we break down all the who's-its and what's-its of a galaxy far, far away in case you ever go to a Star Wars-themed cocktail party and someone says, what's The Force Awakens?
Yes. Now, The Force Awakens was directed by Jj Abrams. It was written by Lawrence Kasdan with Jj Abrams and Michael Arndt. That means that Michael Arndt did a draft of the script by himself, and Lawrence Kasdan and Jj Abrams wrote their draft together. It stars.
Can you tell Jason is a professional writer?
It's like most people. Some people might not know that.
No, that's true. It's absolutely true.
It stars all your favorite Star Wars people, plus some new ones. Music by John Williams. It was released in Los Angeles on December 14th in 2015, and it was released publicly December 15th. Its running time is 138 minutes. It had a budget of $306 million, and it made $2 billion.
Ooh.
Yeah. Now, quick synopsis before we get to the spoiler warning. It was set 30 years. The synopsis is this movie is set 30 years after Return of the Jedi. The Force Awakens follows Rey, Finn, Poe, and Han Solo's search for Luke Skywalker and their fight in the Resistance led by General Leia Organa and veterans of the Rebel Alliance against Kylo Ren and the First Order, a successor to the Galactic Empire. That's a lot of backstory in that synopsis.
It's also a lot of backstory in the opening crawl of this movie.
All right, so now let's move into our Meet Cute section of the podcast.
Yeah, the Meet Cute is where we steal a term from romantic comedy writing and we tell you the first time we met this and how cute it was.
Yes, now, Trisha, I'm very curious. What is your Meet Cute to Star Wars? Do you remember what the first Star Wars thing you ever saw was?
Oh, to Star Wars in general, not just
Star Wars in general, yeah.
I'm trying to think. My parents were not into Star Wars, so I didn't grow up with Star Wars the way a lot of my friends did. And in fact, a lot of the pop culture and genre stuff that I love now, I didn't discover until college when I had the freedom to explore and discover that stuff on my own. And I want to say I probably watched A New Hope in college for the first time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So you never experienced like what some people call the children boom, or like because you're a kid, you're so like wide-eyed by Star Wars.
Yeah, no, I think that I jumped in sometime in college, and I think I was culturally aware of, who C-3PO and R2-D2 and Luke Skywalker were. I was aware of it, but I don't know that I actually sat down and watched the movie until I was older.
Ashley, have we ever talked about this? What is your meet cute to Star Wars?
I think we've done this in every Star Wars episode we've done,
whatever.
which is about 5 or 6 at this point.
Let's do it again.
I always knew about Star Wars. I knew Darth Vader was Luke's father before I ever saw Star Wars. And when I was in elementary school, it was one of the anniversaries where they re-released a whole set of the original trilogy. And I remember watching that. And my dad was a big Star Wars fan, which is wild because he was not a genre guy, but this was the thing that he loved. Like for a lot of people, it's the thing that broke through. So it was always something that I knew about. I watched it in elementary school. And then the prequels came out, and here's a story that I tell now and I wouldn't tell for a long time. Ooh. I love Jar Jar Binks so much. I had the little action figure, and I had a plastic see-through purse, and I carried that action figure around in my little kid purse for a long time.
Whoa. So Jar Jar was like your protector?
I love Jar Jar. Which I think is why now as an adult, I have so much love and respect for Ahmed Best, because I, as a little kid, didn't realize like that was a bad character, that the CGI was bad, what was weird about it. I thought he was great. And, it was sort of diminishing returns as I got a little older.
Fair.
But Luke Skywalker has always been my Star Wars crush. So whenever I talk about Star Wars, I'm always like, I just want a hot Luke Skywalker. That's all I want from Star Wars.
Yeah.
Jason, what is your Star Wars meet cute?
So I'm pretty certain I've told this on the podcast before, but I am, this will betray my age a little bit.
We're all very young.
I'm not Jar Jar young, I'll tell you that. Interesting. I remember one of the first times, I think the first time I ever saw Star Wars was when they played it on Sunday night on ABC. It's when ABC used to have the Sunday night movie. And the thing they would do to like make you watch the movie was that they would put in scenes that were not in the theatrical cut. They would just apparently ABC would just plunk in all the deleted scenes. Apparently there's a lauded Superman the movie cut that only aired on ABC movie that has never aired anywhere else. Wow. But I remember my older brother who had seen Star Wars in theaters. He watched it with me, and I don't know, like I can't remember how old he was, but I remember him during one of the scenes in the desert with R2-D2 and C-3PO being like, "That's not in the movie." What's with this? That's wrong. But of course, ABC did that because they needed to make the movie 3 hours long to fill commercials. Yeah. But that's what I remember from my first Star Wars memory.
There you go.
All right, everybody, let's get into the full spoiler thoughts of Star Wars: The Force Awakens. And Trisha, I'm going to go to you because I want to ask you. Do you remember the last time you watched Star Wars: The Force Awakens before we asked you to watch it for this?
In theaters.
Oh, wow. Okay, so my very first thought, I'm going to ask you, this is going to limit you because I don't want you to give your full answer here. In one sentence, what are your thoughts seeing it 5 years later?
Pretty much the same, which is, that I thought it was unoriginal but entertaining enough. If they're going to bring, and I also think I went into it with very low expectations the first time. We were coming off the prequels, which I didn't love. Spoiler alert. And going into the Skywalker saga, and so I think I went in with all right, well, let's see what this is. And was pleasantly surprised that it was entertaining. There were definitely issues that I had with it as a 30-something Star Wars fan, but ultimately I was like, this movie isn't made for me. And when I saw little kids at Comic-Con and various different conventions, like dressing up as Rey and Poe and Finn and BB-8 were like their Star Wars, I was like, you know what? I'm 100% on board with this. Great, good. And out of the Skywalker saga, I think that A Force Awakens is by and far the best of the three.
Yes, I do agree with you that I think this of the new Disney trilogy. We got to come up with a name for this trilogy. The Rey trilogy, I guess.
Isn't it the Skywalker saga? Isn't that the official name of it?
That's what they're calling it, which I think is mildly
Isn't that for all 9?
Oh, I don't know.
The Skywalker Saga, I believe, is just the last. I thought it was just the sequels. Maybe they're using it for all.
I don't know, but again, I think that's hilarious because there's like hardly any Skywalkers in it.
Yeah, there is hardly any Skywalkers in it. Yes, you are 100% correct that this is by far and away the other one. I want to because there's a question I have that I think is going to be very interesting for everybody in the chat and for everybody here that I do want to save till the very end. So I want to let's not talk about the sequels if we can. And I know it's going to be really tough because you want to talk about the sequel since we've seen all three. Mm-hmm. But I want to talk about the beginning of this movie starts with these amazing shots of the stormtroopers and stuff. Seeing these flashes of the stormtroopers coming down. And I think that this is one of the few times in any of the Star Wars movies that I think the stormtroopers are scary.
The way that this is shot is a very Jj Abrams thing to me. This feels very Mission Impossible, very Lostian, and dare I say, it feels a little more like a film than the prequels did.
Yes. Let me ask you, we had been wondering about a Star Wars movie for so long. It had been, I don't know the exact math, at least 10, it had been 10 years exactly, because Revenge of the Sith came out in 2005. Trisha, what do you feel about this opening on this desert planet where this X-Wing pilot is asking people for where Luke Skywalker is, and then a Darth Vader guy shows up? We've had no Star Wars for a decade. What do you feel about this opening? A good opening, a bad opening, since we hadn't seen Star Wars in quite a while?
I was buckled in and ready. I legit felt like I got on a Disney ride and buckled in, and I was like, let's do this. And so, I mean, I was into it. I agree. I thought it made the stormtroopers feel a lot scarier. And I'm not sure if this is in the exact portion that you're talking about here, but kind of the Finn reveal was such a cool. I hadn't seen anything in Star Wars up until this point that humanized stormtroopers.
Yes.
And in humanizing them and giving them a bit of a backstory with Finn's character, I felt like that was so powerful. And I agree with you, Ashley. Add to that even way more terrifying when you realize these are people that are they're not just bad guys, pew pew. These are people that actually believe this message and philosophy and are dedicating their lives to it. That in and of itself makes it a lot more real and a lot more terrifying. So that was a choice that they made in this film that I thought was really solid.
Now, Ashley, I have a very long stormtrooper diatribe, as you know.
I do know this.
I know how much you like Finn.
I do like Finn.
So I want to hear your thoughts on this opening.
I was into this opening and also not into this opening. I have such conflicted feelings about it because I love Oscar Isaac. And this was a big Oscar Isaac moment for us in popular culture because Ex Machina had just come out and that was super hot. And that was the interview where him and Domhnall Gleeson both revealed the names of their characters on the junket and they thought they'd broken their NDA and it was this whole big thing. Mm-hmm. So I loved when we land that our POV character is Poe and is Oscar Isaac. And he's so handsome. So I was like, I'm here. I'm ready for this. Kylo Ren shows up, but he's fine.
We'll get to him. We'll get to him.
Yeah, here's the anti-Kylo camp right here. I don't like that character. I'm sorry.
Let's see. One pro Jar Jar, anti-Kylo. All right.
That's the hill I'm going to die on. And pro Luke
I'm
Skywalker.
Setting social media up for their correct tweets for you, Ashley.
And I like that it feels so serious until the moment where Poe goes, would you talk first or do I talk first or do I talk first? I don't like that joke. I don't think it's appropriate. I don't think it fits tonally with Star Wars. Jason said something to me when we watched this yesterday that Star Wars needs a level of formality to it. And it's something that Gene Roddenberry used to say about Star Trek, where he would always say that you can't write any kind of modern day statements into Star Trek because that's not Star Trek. And I kind of feel the same way about Star Wars.
And Star Wars has always struggled tonally with comedy.
Yes. And it's also because it fits into this weird world where it's not high fantasy, but it has a lot of trappings of that genre because of what it was influenced by. And I know Trisha is a huge Lord of the Rings fan, so she'll back me on this. If a Hobbit came up and was like, so do you talk first or do I talk first? Or do you talk? You'd be like, this is absolutely not the place for
Can you imagine if Bilbo in The Hobbit was like, what up, dog?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there
like it wouldn't scan. And
bye, Felicia.
Yeah. and yes, the moment's funny. And Oscar Isaac plays it well, but to me, like this heralds, there's weird moments throughout this movie where they try to put in these little bits and pieces of comedy, and it feels like a movie that's being made in 2015.
Yes.
But as a sequel to a franchise that was made in the 60s, for me, this is the first place where it disconnects.
Mm-hmm.
So can I ask you, if this is too much of a tangent, reel me back in.
There are no
you then how you felt of the opening of the last episode of The Mandalorian?
Oh, where it's like the Tag and Bink characters?
Yeah.
Okay, so that one, I'll give you a pass on that because the Tag and Bink thing is so baked into fandom. And because that was something that people were asking for such a long time, I didn't mind that, but I'm definitely not as in love with The Mandalorian as the rest of the world.
Hot take.
We have a great super chat here that I want to bring up from a good patron of ours, David Skelton, who says, more successful franchise reboot, The Force Awakens or Star Trek? Now, for me, and I've said this for many years, I think that Star Trek 2009 by Jj Abrams is Jj Abrams' best film. I don't think he's ever beat it. I just think it fires on all levels in terms of characters, writers, and then the finished product. It's a difference, right? Because you can look at Star Trek 2009 sort of by itself, more so I feel than you can with The Force Awakens, because with The Force Awakens, we know it's part of a trilogy, whereas Star Trek, even though it did have 2 other movies, we don't really connect them all as one thread. And with this, we do. So for me, it's far and away Star Trek 2009.
See, and I would disagree on that because
go ahead. Let's hear your thoughts.
If the question is more successful franchise reboot, to me, that means like taking a franchise that is dead. Star Wars was never dead, but taking a franchise that needs to be reinvigorated and have some new life breathed into it. And just based on the sheer fandom explosion that we saw after The Force Awakens versus, I guess you could moderately say, a fandom explosion after the new Star Trek.
Sure,
let's look at amounts of cosplays, like not money again, and not looking at this as which is the better film, because there I would agree with you.
Yeah, you know what, Trisha, I think you are right. Like for a better film, to me, it is clearly Star Trek 2009. But I think you have convinced me with your argument.
Yeah, for a franchise reboot, I would have to give it to The Force Awakens.
Do you agree, Ashley?
I do, but I will also say that they're so hard to compare. Like it is truly apples and oranges, and I know the names are similar.
It's more like apples and automotive tires.
Sure. So we love to compare them for that reason, right? Star Wars, Star Trek, they kind of came out of the same zeitgeist. They were inspired by a lot of the same things. I actually think the Star Trek 09 movie had a lot more work to do because Star Trek had been like quote unquote dead for longer, and it was trying to take something that was mostly a television franchise and quote unquote elevate it, even though right now I actually think TV is way better than movies, to a film. And I think with Star Wars, it already had, even though the prequels were wildly unpopular, they were very successful. And I think I've enjoyed a kinder lens as we've looked back on them over the course of time. But I think it was a less of an act to take Star Wars and make it populous than to take Star Trek and make it populous. But again, if you're looking at sort of the overall pop culture or popular arts impression, I think you have to give it to The Force Awakens. The Force Awakens is an exercise in promise. This movie has a bunch of really wonderful ideas in it.
We're gonna man, I'm gonna tell you, this end of episode conversation is gonna be so good. I'm looking forward to it. I want to talk about one thing in this movie, and it is something that really bothers me. One, I want to put a check mark on. I do agree with your points earlier. Making a stormtrooper the lead of this movie was such a genius decision. The enemy of the previous trilogy becoming the hero, so great. But I have a problem. And the problem is with what I'm looking at on screen right now. I'm showing you an X-Wing and stormtroopers, and it's just the same thing. There's more story time between the Force Awakens trilogy than there is the prequels trilogy. There's 30 years compared to 16 from the prequels. And the design of the galaxy looks exactly the same. There are still TIE fighters. There are still X-Wings. There are still Rebel pilots. There are still stormtroopers. And one of the exciting things, one of the things the prequels does really well is that it had the design eye of George Lucas. I mean, the pod racers were way the heck out there. The designs of the ships are way out there. I wouldn't have minded seeing an X-Wing or a TIE fighter or a stormtrooper every once in a while. But the fact that this movie's basic visual look is exactly the same as A New Hope kind of bothers me a little bit. And to me, it's the biggest flaw of this newer trilogy.
And I bet as a tech person, Trisha has a great take on that.
Probably not as great of a take as you would think. I mean, I'm honestly cool with that decision. Like, I think that there is a magic to that world that George Lucas built that I don't want to see completely redone.
Oh, I totally understand why they did it.
So is your gripe is mainly with the tech advancement that would have happened in that time?
I guess my gripe is a little bit that I would have liked to have seen the artistry pushed a little bit further away.
Because we did get some new ships and we did get some new forms of lightsaber, some new technology. But I would say you're right. It's predominantly what we're used to seeing. I would say maybe it's a 80-20 split, and that's probably being generous to the new stuff to say 20% new stuff, 80% old stuff. But I think they were also walking a tightrope, which a lot of people say played it way too safe and boring, walking that tightrope of trying to still keep it the Star Wars we all know and love and not piss off Star Wars fans who can be very easily pissed off, as we learned from the prequels, trying to keep it faithful for the Star Wars fans that grew up with it, but also trying to modernize it for a new generation. So I do think overall in this movie, which I'm sure we'll talk about in great detail, they err on the side of safety.
They do.
Which may make it a little bit unoriginal, but I still think that it's entertaining despite the fact that they played it a little safe.
Ashley, I'd love to hear your thought. Let's talk about, this movie, what I think one of the things this movie does really well is the introduction of Rey. I think when you first meet Rey, it's a very nice sequence of her going through the old Star Destroyer. I don't even know what the old ship, the Empire ship that's crashing the ground, that thing. She's grabbing parts. She's doing stuff like that. I even think the introduction of Finn is really good here. What do you think about the first time Rey and Finn meet? They're meet cute. How do you feel about them as characters?
So here's a hot take from Ashley. Rey's theme is the only good original piece of music in the whole score. And I think that song is so incredible. I think it is such an incredible piece of music because it's original. It's something new and different, and it is unlike anything we've heard from Star Wars up to this point. And yes, it's cool when the Imperial March comes back. And yes, it's cool when we hear the Star Wars theme over the opening crawl. And yeah, this moment that Jason's playing right here and Rey's theme plays over this, it's beautiful. And as somebody whose favorite animated Disney movie growing up was Aladdin, this is very near and dear to my heart. I think this is really wonderful. And it's tough to introduce a character and not have them speak exposition. And this does it really, really well. Whereas when we first meet Finn, we use his escape with Poe to say a lot of things at people so that we understand who Finn is and what he's about. One of my favorite shots in this movie remains when Finn pops up in the desert and he's panting. And I remember that movie, and some people have mentioned this in the comments. I remember that moment in the trailer when that happened, and everyone was like, a stormtrooper of color, what? And to me, Finn is the single most interesting character. And here's my hottest take about this movie. Finn should have been the lead. Finn should have been the lead of this trilogy because the idea of Finn is so cool. I love this sequence. I think the sequence is beautiful. I think John Boyega acts the heck out of it. Yeah, and you could definitely tell up to that point that Oscar Isaac was supposed to have died in the first draft.
Oh, he was. He originally was in the original, and apparently, and you learned this in the Force Awakens director's commentary, that the original plans were for Poe Dameron to die in that crash, and then Oscar Isaac was like, "Hey, I'm barely in this movie, right?" And Jj Abrams was like, "You're right, Oscar Isaac. I'll put you in the end." And because of that, he got 2 more paychecks. There, it's funny. Talking about Finn and Rey. This is another thing that was revealed in the Jj Abrams director's commentary was Harrison Ford. I don't know if you guys remember. Harrison Ford was injured during the filming of this movie. And they shut down production for over 2 months because he broke his leg. Apparently what happened...
The door closed on
It's the ramp of the Millennium Falcon.
Uh-huh.
They made it practical so where it actually came down. And apparently one of the times it landed on his foot and like broke his foot.
OSHA was not on the set that day.
So Harrison basically could not walk without a cane for a long time. So during that 2 months downtime, they rewrote the script and they edited together a version of the movie with as much as they had. And they noticed, they were like, oh, we're missing some stuff with some of the Rey and Finn, and we're missing some of the stuff with Poe. Mm-hmm. In fact, in that original batch of filming, John Boyega spoke in his native dialect.
He should have kept it.
So Finn and Rey were both British. And then when they were like, this is too weird, two British people talking to each other. So they went back and refilmed all that stuff so that Finn could have an American dialect.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so fascinating. I didn't know that. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, full of stuff. Let's talk about the reveal of the Millennium Falcon and also leading up to Han Solo. Now, Ashley, I know you have very strong thoughts on this because I know your answer to this question. So I want to ask Trisha. Trisha, is there any version of this movie that could have worked without Han Solo? Could you have not had Han Solo in this movie?
As it exists currently, no.
Well, I'm just saying, like, do you think this movie could have worked? Let's say, like, you take the Millennium Falcon completely out, you take Han Solo completely out. Do you think that, is there any way you could have done this first Star Wars movie in 10 years without Han Solo?
I mean, maybe. Yeah, if it was a lot more like Rogue One than The Force Awakens. You know, I feel like Rogue One didn't have to rely on tons and tons and tons of fan service to be a good Star Wars movie. But that's not the direction that they chose to go, very obviously, with The Force Awakens, since it's basically A New Hope all over again. Yeah. But, you know, I'm sorry that I keep kind of saying the same thing in a different way, but like, you know, rebooting that story in a way that a new generation might be more receptive to and with a more diverse cast. And, you know, like, I don't think that was a bad call and I'm not mad at it. It's not my favorite. It's like, for me, Rogue One and The Mandalorian are like, as an adult Star Wars fan, so Ashley, you and I will, I'm sure, disagree on The Mandalorian. But, you know, it's the,
I like The Mandalorian as well. It was really fun.
It's the parent in me. Like, I love seeing kids want to be Rey and want to be Finn and want to be Poe and have their own BB-8 toys. And like, that makes me so happy in my heart space. And I do think that they went with what I would argue, and this is my hot take, was a pretty smart move to bring back Han Solo and the Millennium Falcon. And like, how many of us lost our crap in, I forget which teaser or which reveal it was, that we saw Chewie and Han at the end of.
Yeah, we're home.
Oh my God! Like, they needed that after the prequels to pull us back in.
Now, Ashley.
Yes.
I know your thoughts on this, so I'd love to hear them. Han Solo in this movie, the Millennium Falcon in this movie. How do you feel?
So I completely understand why an executive said that we need to have Han and Luke and Leia in this. I really do understand the thinking behind that. Obviously, it worked. This movie made $2 billion.
$2 billion.
I don't like Han Solo. I don't like that Han Solo has become the standard by which all men hold themselves and all male sci-fi characters are held. I don't think Han Solo is good in this movie. I think this movie would have been better without Han Solo. But my issue ultimately stems from, it's my opinion, it's my feelings about the character.
Nobody's opinions are wrong.
And also,
you love Jar Jar. That's not a wrong opinion.
I don't love Jar Jar.
You love Jar Jar. We just heard this.
I did when I was a child.
Love past tense, right, Ashley?
Yeah. Surprise! Next week's guest, Ahmed Best.
Truly, he can come on anytime.
To be honest with you, I would love to have him. He's super talented.
But what I really come up against with this movie is that I feel like this movie is trying to tell me that Han Solo and the Millennium Falcon are Star Wars. And for me, that's not what I love best about Star Wars stories and experiences in this world. And I wouldn't even have minded him being in this, but I don't think he needs to be the fourth lead of the movie. I think he's in it way too much. But my biggest issue ultimately with Han Solo is that I'm supposed to believe that him and Leia named their kid Ben and not Bale. But that's just the Jimmy Smits fan in me.
I mean, we're gonna go there. That my favorite Star Wars character is Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Yeah.
And in fact, over on a shelf just left the camera, there are 5 Obi-Wan Kenobi action figures. He's my favorite Star Wars character. Yeah, that is one of the things that bothers me, is because I don't think that Han Solo or Leia have the connection to Ben Obi-Wan Kenobi that Luke does. So it bothers me that they name him Ben.
That feels like, to me, and I know we're jumping like way ahead, but that feels like a choice that was made in a writer's room. It was like, oh, well, everyone loves Obi-Wan Kenobi, so let's call him Ben, without maybe thinking about those two characters' relations to it. And I do want to say, out of the other side of my mouth, that even though I do think Han Solo's in the movie too much, him and Leia, I think, get a really wonderful moment toward the last hour of this movie.
Well, I want to talk about like this perfect way to transition into Kylo Ren. Now, I actually think the look of Kylo Ren, I think, is really great. I think his mask looks super cool.
Well, like Trisha said, when the first time we saw that lightsaber in the trailer, everyone was like, what is this lightsaber?
See, that's the change I need. It's like up to that point we were like, a lightsaber with a crossguard? What? It's only later where they went a little ridiculous, where they were like, how about one that looks like a Swiss Army knife? You know, and you're like, that's a step too far, Disney. That's a step too far, Disney. But anyways, I think the look of Kylo Ren's mask, it evokes Darth Vader in the right way. He fills the Darth Vader role in this movie. And my only problem with Kylo Ren is once he takes the mask off, he just becomes a person. Whereas all the time he has I'm fine with him taking off the mask for his dad and that scene, because I really like that scene and stuff like that. But up until that point, he comes off this really angry, mysterious bad guy, and the minute they take the mask off, it loses the illusion for me. But I actually think he's a well-designed villain. I think he's great until he becomes a person.
Well, because by contrast, right, Darth Vader's not a person.
No.
In the conventional sense, and he doesn't take his mask off until his dying breath.
Trisha, what do you feel about Kylo Ren in this movie and the reveal that he's Ben Solo?
I am with Ashley on this one.
I finally won Trisha over.
Yeah,
Ding, ding, ding.
I never love Kylo Ren. I know people adore him and adore Adam Driver, and I'm not going to yuck anyone else's yum. If you love him, fantastic. I could not help feeling through this entire sequel trilogy that he was just a whiny baby man. And like, I understand that going to the dark side is all about not having control of your emotions, but he didn't seem scary or formidable to me. He seemed like someone needed to backhand him and tell him to get it together. And
why didn't Han Solo do that in this movie?
Right,
that's totally in Han Solo's character.
When it is then revealed that he's this huge leader that they all look up to, and and he's able to be the one that destroys his superior and like all this stuff, I'm like, not buying it. If this guy was legit in any kind of organizational villain hierarchy, he would be nowhere near the top. Let's just be for real. So he's very hard for me to buy the entire time. Adam Driver, I do think, is an amazing performer. I really don't love the character and the way the character was written and the character choices. And so, yes, I am with Ashley on the Kylo. Like, I put up with Kylo Ren being in these movies.
Well, I will say that I agree with both of you in later movies, but we're only talking about this one.
Yeah, we referenced all the Star Wars movies, and it's so hard. It's so hard not to. But I love the moment in the opening sequence where he stops the laser blast. I don't know. It's
a great moment.
Space. Like, that's something new that we've never seen a Jedi do before. And it, like, the underlying amount of, it feels like an Anakin Skywalker move to me. So I think, like, there's little moments of brilliance like that. But then the moment where he destroys the control panel with his really cool lightsaber, I was like, tantrum. You are every boy I wanted to date in high school, so I know that you are toxic.
That's hilarious.
Man. And for me, the character never recovers from that movie. And You made a really wonderful point, Trisha. Like, I think Adam Driver's been really excellent in other things. I think he's awesome in Black Klansman. But I'm never going to hop on that Knights of Ren train. And again, if people love him, lots of people that I love him. That's totally cool. More action figures for you.
Well, I want to talk about the relationship between Rey and Han Solo, because that's going to replace all the daddy issues of Kylo Ren.
This movie has walking daddy issues. Oh, it's Star Wars : daddy issues.
But I want to play for everybody what I think is actually what I consider to be the greatest scene in the entire movie. And here we go.
People going to come for you on Twitter. It's another moment that's definitely for the trailer.
It's definitely for the trailer, but like we talked about this a little bit when we watched it yesterday. The reason why this is my favorite scene in the entire movie is because, and this is one of the genius things that Jj Abrams does in this movie, because Jj Abrams is a good director. I think there's people. I think if people have criticisms about Jj Abrams, I think most of those come from his scripting abilities, not his directing ability. Sure. He is a damn good director. And the genius thing about this moment is that he set this scene in the exact same spot. He has a scene where Han Solo is like, I believe all of it, the Jedi, the Force, all that stuff is real, in the same spot where he told Obi-Wan Kenobi that it was a bunch of mumbo jumbo.
Yeah.
And that, to me, you want to talk about character growth and character arc. Man, that is amazing. That's why, I mean, that's a perfect trailer moment. It gives me goosebumps. Do you buy the Rey/Han Solo father-daughter relationship in this movie?
No.
Oh, really?
Not
okay.
for 1 minute. I said this when we watched it. So after they've escaped, they go to the planet. One of my favorite moments is where Rey says, I've never seen so much green in my life.
That's a great moment.
I think that's a very genuine human moment. I think that's very beautiful. And so we're supposed to believe that Han Solo and Leia Organa is one of the greatest romances of all time. He got her pregnant. They had a kid. He ran away. He hasn't seen either of them in at least 10 years, if not 15 years by this point. Because, Ben went and did his training when he was 15. And so, it's been 15 years. He's been a scumbag this whole time. And now he meets this cute girl and he's like, I'll be your dad. No, I don't buy it. I don't buy it for a single second. I don't like it.
You just don't like Han Solo.
I don't. I truly don't. I am over.
But remember,
Han
she loves
Solo.
Jar Jar. She loves Jar Jar.
Oh, give her a break. Give her a break.
Hey, we all love Jar Jar, right?
Now, Jason said something to me where he's like, no, he loves her because, or he like has this connection with her because she has that moment where she bypasses the compressor. So like she's good with the ship and she understands the ship and he loves the ship.
Yeah, the ship is his dog. And because I know Chewie's his dog too, but the ship is his second dog. And the fact that she treats the second dog very nicely, like she's like, oh, do this compressor and here I'm going to pet it a little bit. That's how he views it.
I have such a hard time with, he's a deadbeat dad to his actual child. And even if I like his actual child even less than I like him, it's hard for me to think that because he's conveniently, he can conveniently be a parent figure to our orphan character in this movie. Like,
sure,
I understand that we're contriving this because we're going to murder him in 30 minutes. But I don't buy it. I don't buy
Hey, it's all good. Trisha, what do you feel about the relationship?
Parent, Trisha.
Oh, yes.
Well, there you go. As a parent, no, honestly, the reason that for me, it's not 100% thing. It's not either like it's a father-daughter relationship or it's not a father-daughter relationship. I think it falls somewhere in between. And in that somewhere in between, I'm willing to buy it to a certain extent, only because that Han is anyone who has a kid, you're never going to stop thinking about your kid, no matter if you're separated or what happens. So Han, I'm sure, is constantly thinking about what kind of father he could have been if given the opportunity. And Rey, as an orphan, I'm sure is constantly thinking about what that relationship with a parent would be like. So even if their relationship is initially just one of friendship and kind of mutual respect for their love of the Millennium Falcon and piloting skills, I'm sure inherently even subconsciously, somewhere in there, there's going to be some type of father-daughter hopefulness. Whether that actually becomes a father-daughter relationship per se, I don't think it does 100% for me in this movie. But I do think that there's moments of that. And I do think that moments of that would be a kind of very realistic and believable thing. So I don't necessarily feel that it was 100% contrived. But I don't know that they were, I guess they were intending it for it to really feel that way. But like I said, for me, it falls somewhere on that spectrum, not 100% father-daughter, not just platonic mechanic friends.
Wait, you mean things could be in a gray area?
Yeah. For me, for a lot of stuff, I would say to Ashley, like, and I said this a lot, we were watching it, it sets up that in a popcorn movie way, where like, it's like popcorn movie romances, right? Where, you know, by the end of the movie, by the end of 2 hours, these two characters have to be like, I love you, even though they just met. So for me, there's always like a checklist where, and Han and Rey do check off enough of those bumps to get me there. But I agree with you. It's like kind of somewhere in the middle. We have a great couple of super chats here that I want to bring up. Adam Grunther said, do you think that too many mysteries were set up in this movie? Trisha, I would love to hear your thoughts on this.
I do not. That being said, I'm not someone that gets super angry at series like Lost and The Leftovers for setting up too many questions.
I love both of those.
Biases. I think it's fascinating when there's a lot of things up in the air that need to be answered. I think maybe we feel like there were too many things set up because all the lovely things that were set up on a silver platter for us were completely smashed into the floor by The Last Jedi. And so that's where my frustration is with The Last Jedi for trolling us all hard on all the beautiful, like, lobbed softballs The Force Awakens gave us. But I liked all the softballs. I think we asked a lot of questions, and I was excited to see how they'd be answered until The Last Jedi.
You know, for me, I think there are too many mysteries set up in this movie, but the main reason I think that is because, and this is something that Jj Abrams is very guilty of. He is, and you can see the TED Talk on this on YouTube. He is obsessed with this story idea called the mystery box, where you get the audience obsessed with what is this MacGuffin, what is this idea, and what that is that, like, the idea means nothing. It doesn't matter what the idea is. It matters that the audience goes along with you in the journey. And there's a lot of mystery box storytelling in this, especially with the lightsaber and Rey's,
which is actually Anakin's lightsaber. It's not Luke's lightsaber, and everyone says it's Luke's lightsaber.
And Rey's parentage. But I don't think it's the fact that the mystery box doesn't work. I think the thing that doesn't work is that Star Wars has never been a mystery box franchise. No other Star Wars movie, television show has ever been a mystery box show. And I think that's what us as an audience, I think that's what we're knocking up against, is that we expect this to be an adventure movie, but it's a mystery movie.
I actually think Trisha hit on something really well, though. I think we are feeling like maybe backward frustration with this movie, or revisiting this movie knowing that these things aren't paying off.
Yes.
Or that they're not paying off in a way that we are satisfied with. Because I'll definitely echo that. I'm not a fan of what happens in the next movie after this.
We're getting to that. We're getting to it.
And again, I'm trying not too hard to get too deep in the weeds on the future movies. Because when you look at A New Hope, which is in my opinion the greatest Star Wars movie of all time, and you'll never beat it, there's a lot of mystery set up there as well.
Yes.
And Star Wars really...
Who's Luke's father?
Yeah, and like, who is Leia, and what is her relationship to any of the other characters? Like, there's a lot of stuff that's baked in there that we reveal over movie, well, I'll say 2 and 3, but 5 and 6, because numbers. And I think ultimately what that comes down to is because this trilogy was not developed, written, produced, directed by any of the same people.
No.
So you don't have the OG Star Wars trilogy. It's the hero's journey, right? It's like, it's this type of storytelling. You go to your climax, and then you have your denouement, you tie everything up. And we don't get any of that, or we don't get that as nicely and as cleanly as we would have wanted. So I think I'm the person in the middle of this question.
I want to talk about, we have a couple other great super chats here, but I want to talk about, first off, what did you guys think, or ladies, excuse me, I just say guys. That's just my thing.
We're trying to stamp that out, and it's so hard.
What did you think about the Rey finding the lightsaber? What did you think about that whole sequence and the fact that it was a mystery that we never find out where it comes from? In fact, I want to tell you this. It was revealed in the director's commentary that the original beginning of this movie was seeing the journey of Luke's lightsaber to Maz Kanata. That was supposed to be the original opening. In fact, this movie was supposed to open on a shot of Luke's lightsaber like spinning in space.
I remember when that was just a Reddit rumor.
Yeah. But what do you both feel about that?
It's interesting because I'm gonna say this about Maz Kanata. It is travesty that they did not put Lupita Nyong'o in more of this movie, because she's amazing. She's incredible. She's one of the finest working actors that we have right now. And they just made her Yoda 2.0. We could have had 2 whole people of color in a Star Wars movie. And we didn't do that. For me, ultimately, I like the dream sequence that we get, because there's so many cool voice Easter eggs. And if you are like a deep Star Wars nerd, there's a lot of stuff to be mined from.
Oh, yes. Ewan McGregor's Obi-Wan Kenobi is in that.
I'm totally here for all of this. But for me, this whole scene, this is a plot contrivance. I think this is for the convenience of, we have to move past this.
It's a literal mystery box.
It's a literal mystery.
She opens up the box and there's the lightsaber. Trisha, what do you feel about the mystery of Luke's lightsaber?
I mean, it made me hypothesize as to, are Luke and Rey related? And I think it sent me down a lot of the same thought patterns that it was intending to send people down, and trying to get people on board with Rey being a Jedi. And, it's definitely not my favorite portion of this film, but I didn't mind it either. I wasn't looking at it with a hypercritical eye, and even now I'm kind of the same feelings as what you said, Ashley, where it's like, I love the voice cameos. Mm-hmm. I thought that was really cool. And yeah, I'm sure people are super critical of it being the literal mystery box that it is, but I don't mind mystery box entertainment. So I
mean, we don't either.
No,
like, we're huge.
Well, I love Lost.
And
again, this is another one of those things where you're like, I think because we know where it goes, it's interesting, and we know that this is never paid off. So that's where my frustration is mainly coming from.
My favorite moment in this whole Maz Kanata sequence is when you first see the outside of the building with all the flags, because it's so gorgeous. Mm-hmm. Like, the movie looks incredible and has some really wonderful design elements. And then I just love the joke that she's in love with Chewie. I think that's hysterical.
Mike Bundy has a super chat for us here. What was your original thoughts on who Rey was, especially since we see the scene where Rey gets left by her parents in this dream sequence? Trisha, from everything you saw in The Force Awakens, did you have any thoughts on who Rey was?
I mean, they kind of spoon-fed us like, she's some relation to Luke. You're welcome.
Yeah, I thought
great, she's some relation to Luke.
Yeah,
Looking forward to hearing how this plays
in
out.
her face that, she's a Skywalker. She's a Skywalker.
So I mean, honestly, so I was just like, okay, again, buckled into the Disney ride. Take me on this roller coaster, please.
I guess Luke got busy. All right.
She was the easiest scare at the Haunted Mansion because she's 100% here for it.
100% here for it. And, obviously I was like, well, we don't know what the story of Luke having some type of offspring is, but tell me that story as I get out my popcorn and goobers. I didn't doubt it. I wasn't expecting any kind of bait and switch. I was like, oh, this is where we're going. Cool.
Yeah.
I thought that her and Kylo were going to be a version of the twins from the extended universe of Jason and Jaina.
Ooh, yes.
And even though when the visual dictionary came out, it said that Kylo was 29, LOL, and that Rey was 19, LOL. I was like, okay, then what they're going to do is they're going to say that they're Force twins, right? That they are like spirits who are connected through the Force.
Yep.
When I originally heard the rumors that it wound up being a romance, I was like, there's no way. They did nothing to set this up. There's no way. I really wanted her to be no one, because I didn't want Star Wars with the prequels became Space Kardashians, and That's not, again, some people are
very
really into
small
that.
universe.
That's fine.
Yes.
That's not what I wanted. I really wanted Rey to be just no one. But like Trisha said, they spend so much time teasing you about her legacy. And she's asked her name like 20 times.
Oh,
and
by the way, I just want to full
disclosure.
Full disclosure. Thank you, Ashley. Ashley has not seen Rise of Skywalker.
I haven't.
So it's funny that she says that statement because all over Rise of Skywalker, they're like, Rey, what's your last name, Rey?
Wait, you have not seen Rise of Skywalker?
No. Okay, so here's my negative. I'm putting my negative hat on. The greatest gift that Star Wars: The Last Jedi gave me was I don't need to see Star Wars movies anymore. Because the kind of storytelling that I'm interested in from Star Wars and from this world is what they're doing in the TV shows. It's not what they're doing with these movies. So I didn't go see it because I didn't care.
I just wanted to bring that up because I thought in Rise of Skywalker, there are like so many setups where people are like, what's your last name, miss?
And then
100%, yes.
Anyway,
all over the movie.
I think we've gone way off. And again, if anyone likes Last Jedi, that's or what's the last one called?
Rise of Skywalker.
That's fine.
Okay, so we have a bunch of super chats, but there's a couple of things I want to talk about before we get to the end here. Trisha, the death of Han Solo. Watching it recently, how do you feel it held up? Does it work? Was it sad? What are your thoughts?
It was not one of the most poignant moments in the film for me, and I feel like it should have been.
I agree.
Look, Han Solo should have died
on the Millennium Falcon
in the second movie, like they originally planned.
Oh, in the carbonite?
Yes, because when I was young and I was first watching this, like I totally believed his romance with Leia, and then I got older and noticed the number of times she told him no and he kissed her anyway, and then they got married. And if you had killed him, and then if Leia had really like turned, she was supposed to originally become a Jedi and have a purple lightsaber and show up and save Luke at the end, and
because Luke was supposed to go bad in Return of the Jedi.
He's got the black
and Han was supposed to die for the second time in the Death Star explosion in Return of the Jedi. That's the reason why he has that line when he's looking at the Millennium Falcon before they go to Endor, where he says, "Oh, I have the feeling I'm never going to see it again."
Yeah. So like to me, knowing that we could have had that.
Yeah.
This death, and also because it's flagged from 8 million miles away by the fact that Finn and Rey are just watching it, it loses some of the bite that could have been there. And also because he's not Jar Jar Binks, so I have no emotional attachment to him, and so it didn't bother me when he died.
That's right.
I mean, it's beautifully shot. It's a very cinematic end. It's very pretty.
It looks great.
The blue and the red, the way that they use the color correcting in this movie. And in that scene in particular, like Kylo is shot in red and he has blue in the background, and Han is shot in blue and he has red in the background. Like, it's a very gorgeous scene.
They shot that completely on blue screens.
No.
Whoa.
Well, I know, surprise. But they actually shot that completely on blue screens, including Rey and Finn and Chewie, because they were uncertain about. They wanted to make sure that the place they picked to kill Han Solo like looked great and looked, so they apparently tried out like several different options until they decided on, let's do this bridge over a chasm.
And it did look great. Like Ashley said, it looked great.
Yeah.
I feel like for the amount of excitement and energy we all had when we saw Han and Chewie in that teaser for the first time, we should have had equal amounts of sadness.
Yeah.
If they decided to kill him off. And for me, it just felt so anticlimactic.
I agree.
What is great about that whole sequence is honestly it's Leia's reaction. Carrie Fisher, when she just sits down, and if you've ever lost someone, that's a very real reaction. And then what it is subtly telling you about how she's still connected to the Force, like that's a great bit of storytelling. Again, with no dialogue, just by seeing her react. I miss Carrie Fisher.
All right, a couple of things I want to talk about, and then everybody out there, we will be taking your questions, everybody that is watching live. And of course, if you want to jump to the head of the line, we thank you to everybody that's doing a super chat. You guys will hop to the bunch of the line, but we will do this giant Q&A section. But we got to talk about a couple more things. One, what do we think about the last fight between Rey and Kylo Ren. Now, one thing I appreciate in the production of this movie is that this is the first Star Wars movie to where they actually made the lightsabers LEDs, so the colors actually refract onto people's faces. I think that makes. I think the snow fight I think looks really good.
Yeah,
I'm actually really excited when Finn lights up the lightsaber.
Finn should have been a Jedi.
I always feel Finn should have been Jedi. But there's and this time I noticed there's a lot of moments where they're trying to justify why Kylo Ren, a guy who's been trained by the Jedi for 15 years now, can be beaten by Rey.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually liked this time through. I really enjoyed the moment actually where Rey closes her eyes and sort of like goes all zen, and then she's able to kick his ass a lot more than I remember the first time I saw it. My immediate thought was like, there's no way in hell she beats him. There's no way in hell she beats him. And this time through, I bought it a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
How did you feel about that end fight?
Well, as a Canadian, I love anything with snow. So I really I think a lot of this movie is beautiful. That end fight is so gorgeous.
It's a well shot movie. Dave Mandel, I think, or no, I'll look up the cinematographer.
Whoever you are, sorry, you did a great job. And it really adds again to like the idea of the color palette, and you visually see the light and the dark represented. But I said earlier that like Finn is full of so much promise.
Dan Mandel. I was very close.
If you would like to come on the podcast, we'd love to have you.
We'd love to have you.
And the moment where Finn steps into the fight and he's not great, I'm totally here for, because I thought, and it's also because Rebels was playing with gray Force users at the same time.
Yes.
I thought they were going to tell us that Finn was Force sensitive, but not that powerful. And I was like, that's going to be so cool. And he's going to have a parallel journey with Rey becoming the Jedi. And we're going to learn that like, it's okay. And how you can work on the spectrum, and we're going to dismantle the Jedi. We didn't do any of it.
Again, really cool softball lobbed in your direction.
Yeah,
totally.
I also don't believe, and when we watched it this time, watching just the way the choreography plays out, there's so many times where but Rey and Kylo both stumble, and one of them will physically have the higher ground on the other one, but doesn't act. And based on what we've seen up to Kylo Ren at this point in the movie, I don't believe that he wouldn't just hit Rey right in the head and knocked her out, because he's a seriously bad dude, and we're building him up to be our total villain. So like I have issues with the way the fight is choreographed, but I also know full well that could also be due to production restraints. That could be due to how quickly they had to shoot this. That could be due to how adept Ridley or Adam Driver is wielding a fake lightsaber around. So I think in the macrocosm it works, but there are little details about it that I sort of like less and less.
Yeah. Okay, so we have to talk about very briefly the cliffhanger of this movie. There are other Star Wars movies with cliffhangers, but this is the most in the middle of a scene cliffhanger. This is a very television move. And I guess that goes to show you, because Jj Abrams is very much a television director and actor.
And we're coming out of the MCU, which is just TV for movies.
Yes. But we see Luke, and we literally never get to hear him speak. Now, I remember when I saw this in theaters, this really just grated my cheese. Like I remember the first time I saw this movie and it hit credits, and I was like, are you kidding me? Luke doesn't even get to say a word? Like, hello? Or
I've been waiting for you.
Or who the hell are you? Or hi, my daughter.
Live long and
anything.
prosper.
Live long and prosper. Yeah, he's gonna say that. Have you checked out StarTrek.com? Trisha, what do you think about this ending with Luke? And how do you feel about it ending in the middle of the scene? Like, we never get to hear Luke speak in this movie.
I thought, ooh, a cliffhanger. Now I have to see the next one. Like, regardless of how I felt about this one, how much I liked or didn't like it, how meh I was on it, which actually I would say was above meh. I was like a 7 or a 7.5 out of 10 when I first saw this. I was like, okay, well, now if I had any reservations about seeing the next one, I guess I have to see the next one just to find out answers to these questions.
Yeah. Ashley, I know Luke is your favorite Star Wars character.
Luke is my actual favorite Star Wars character. I waited the whole damn movie for him to show up. My first thought when we first saw it is I was like, damn, Mark Hamill looks so good. Mark Hamill looks incredible, and I love that he looks like Obi-Wan. I mean, look at how I love him so much. He looks so much like Obi-Wan, and that's so cool. I wish, this is the same frustration that I had when Cap didn't say Avengers Assemble.
Oh yeah.
Which happened
Age of Ultron.
6 months before this, a year before. What is time? Who is she? I don't know her.
I think it's the same year.
But this happened around the same time, and I was like, cool, I guess Disney's just never gonna let us say anything.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we were all just like, okay, great. I guess we'll see Luke in the next movie. And we truly did. They followed through on that promise. We got a lot of Luke in The Last Jedi.
Okay, so we're here at the end. I want to ask some questions to wrap up the movie, basically. Trisha, we're going to start with you. We always do these on our movie retrospectives. Best actor in the movie. Who is the best actor in this movie?
John Boyega.
Excellent choice. Ashley.
Carrie Fisher.
Ooh.
Now I want to change my answer.
And I didn't realize it the first time around because what she's doing is very subtle compared to what a lot of the other actors are doing. And that's because Star Wars generally demands a bigger performance. And she's in a position where she can be a little more tampered, but I think she's really quite good in it. Jason.
I'm going to say BB-8.
I do love BB-8. I have so much BB-8 swag.
We love this little ball before the movie even opened. And
the design is so good, and it's because it's a Ralph McQuarrie. It was one of the original rejected R2-D2 design. The design is so good.
All right, Trisha. Overall, 5 years later, does Star Wars: The Force Awakens hold up?
Define hold up.
Well, by let's say.
I mean, if we're talking about do the effects still look good? Well,
let's say overall, do you feel there are any parts of this movie that have aged badly? Or do you think that this movie is still solid from beginning to end? And that could be in like quality, in terms of certain scenes, special effects, however you would like to take that question. Like,
I think special and practical effects still hold up very well. I think the movie still looks gorgeous. It's hard to judge how the movie's held up now that we've finished out that trilogy.
Yes.
Because now it's like how I look at the Game of Thrones TV series now that I know how the TV series ends. It's been poisoned. The well has been poisoned. And so
somebody poisoned the water hole.
Right, it's very hard to take it into consideration knowing what we know now. However, if you're just looking at this film, like my little dude's only 3. He's not watching Star Wars yet. But when he gets there, I'd be excited to show him this movie. I think there's a lot for the next generation of up-and-coming Star Wars fans to really fall in love with here. And ultimately, if the goal is to get new people that don't know Star Wars invested in the Star Wars universe, I think this movie did that successfully. And it had enough fan service in there to get the people who've been lifelong Star Wars fans interested and re-engaged, even if only re-engaged enough to be like, well, now I need to see what happens with Luke. I think it did its purpose. Do I think it was as solid for me as Rogue One? Absolutely not. But Rogue One wasn't made for kids. That was made for the adult Star Wars fan. So I feel like when you consider the audience, I do still think this movie, The Force Awakens, holds up.
Ashley, does The Force Awakens hold up 5 years later?
I think so. And I think it holds up under a lot of the premises that Trisha named and put out there. And I ultimately think it holds up because it's a copy of the greatest Star Wars movie of all time, A New Hope, which is a very solid structure on which to build your house. This is a movie, I've said it before, I'll say it again. This movie is its potential writ large. It is great ideas thrown out there, many of which do not pay off to my satisfaction. At the very least, I feel like it promises a lot of things that ultimately never came to fruition. But if you're just watching it as a standalone movie, it is a good time. It's definitely a Star Wars movie. Everybody's performance is good or better than good. There's no real stinker in this. But of course, like with all things, you can put it all in a continuum and grade it all individually. There's really, really cute moments in it. And
speaking of cute,
there you go.
There's a
my
BB-8.
Sweet baby angel. And this movie is a lot of fun. So I think by that metric, it holds up. And having not seen the third one in this trilogy, I think it's the best of the trilogy.
Oh.
Jason, what do you think?
It does hold up. It does hold up as a movie. The only thing that I noticed that I would have maybe changed, like if I were looking at it through a 2020 lens, is I think the running time is a little too long. There's a couple beats where I think the movie drags, and because of that, I would be like, take 10 minutes out of it and I think it totally holds up.
We did have a moment where we paused it, and then there was still an hour left in the movie.
But overall, I think Trisha, what do you think this movie is trying to say? We always ask this to our guests. What do you think this movie? What do you think is the theme or the lesson that this movie is trying to tell its audience?
Ooh.
We're making you think deep here.
Yeah. I mean, I think this movie is selling the underdog protagonist really hard, which I love. I am a fan of the underdog protagonist any way you want to spoon feed it to me, whether it's the never ending story or Harry Potter or, you know, or the Lord of the Rings or the Hobbit, you know, like anytime you want to give me a tiny everyday or what's the word I should use here? A unfortunate, lonely soul, an everyday person that needs to save the world and take on some insurmountable evil. I love those stories. So I didn't get mad when Rey went all zen and was suddenly able to defeat Kylo, who's been training for 15 years, because I love an underdog protagonist. And I think that's what this movie is trying to set us up for. It's hard to judge it as a standalone film because we don't get the conclusion to what that is. But I think that they're trying to take us on a journey of anyone can be the hero. And you can be and you can look like whatever you want. And if your heart and your mind is in the right place, that you too can be the hero and save the galaxy. And I think that that's ultimately what Star Wars is about and why it resonates with so many people. And I thought, yeah, this movie was just continuing that message.
Ashley, what do you think this movie's trying to say?
I think you nailed it. I think it's trying to do and I think Spider-Verse actually does it better, where they literally say anyone can be Spider-Man.
Yep.
But I think that
anyone can wear the mask.
Thank you. I think that's what this is trying to set up. And then I think the secret subtext is please go out and buy all the BB-8 merch, which we all did.
Which we did. We all did it.
We have this.
Don't lie. All right.
Want to add anything?
No, I agree. And Trisha nailed it. I think it's weird because there's so much in this movie that is saying Rey is related to somebody in this movie. But at the same time, it is giving you that message that like, oh, you can be this nobody from the middle of nowhere desert and you can be the most powerful Jedi in the universe. And it's just sad that the rest of the movies didn't go that way. Really quickly, because we have a lot of great chats that I want to get to. But one quick question, very quickly, Trisha, I would love to hear a one sentence prediction. Not thinking about The Last Jedi or The Rise of Skywalker, just based on what you saw in The Force Awakens. Where did you think this story was going to go?
Well, I was hoping we would get some kind of like Snoke's really Darth Plagueis. I was hoping that we would see some like gray pseudo Jedi Force thing with Finn. I was hoping that we would find out that Kylo was actually scary and formidable somehow. And when they did set up that there might be some relation between Rey and Luke, I was looking to see what that follow-up was, whether it was direct offspring or I liked the Force twins idea with Kylo. Like there were a lot of things set up that I was very interested to see how they ended. And I think, as is the case with a lot of, especially fantasy and sci-fi out there right now, the internet hive mind sometimes concocts cooler solutions to problems set up in TV and film than the writers can come up with, because, you know, the internet hive mind is ginormous.
Yeah.
The writer's room might be, 5 people. So I think it suffered a lot from that problem, that in all the time we had to think about what it could have been between The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, I think we all fell in love with our own fan theories, and The Last Jedi didn't deliver.
I really quickly, because I thought they were going to give us a left turn and tell us that Rey was a Kenobi.
Yeah.
Or
I
thought for a long time that was going to be the twist, which is why she connected to Luke's lightsaber, was because it was in Obi-Wan Kenobi's possession for 16 years.
You mean Anakin's lightsaber?
Well, but here's the thing: when you actually do the math, Obi-Wan has it longer than anybody else. Yeah. So, like, to me, I was like, I thought that was gonna be the mystery box. Ashley, that's where I thought these movies were going. Ashley, where did you think this franchise was
I
going?
actually thought we were going to get something probably closer to what Logan wound up giving us because as somebody in the Dead Dads Club, I love a grumpy older man relating to a sweet younger girl. That goes right from my heart. And that's what I thought my sweet baby Luke was going to bring us. And then ultimately that's not what happened. But that was what I was really hoping for was a real relationship, a real mentor-mentee relationship between the two. Also with Finn. Like I had a lot of hope for Finn. The first poster of Finn, he's got the blue lightsaber. They told us he was going to be a Jedi.
Yep. All right, let's take some of these questions from the chat here. Kairos Infinitium, I think, says, greetings. Hello. How do you feel about the introduction of Snoke? I personally, I was very thrown off that he was the size of a city building. That was the part that really threw me off in that one. But to be honest with you, Trisha, you nailed it. I thought they were going to reveal that he was Darth Plagueis.
Or that it was
did.
like a rotting body that hosted him or something
yes,
like that.
That's what I really thought. What did you feel about Snoke, Trisha?
I was excited we were getting a villain other than Kylo Ren.
He looks
because
cool.
I feel like this movie really needed a good villain.
Yeah.
But again, hot take. People love Kylo Ren.
I know.
And I don't want to yuck anyone else's yum. If you love him, great. Just for me, I was like, ooh, here's a villain I'm actually intrigued by.
Yeah. Daniel Vakura goes back to our Star Trek 2009 conversation and says, Star Trek 09 has one of the dumbest villains in film history. He goes back in time, and it's never mentioned that he tries to warn and save his family. That's baffling and terrible writing. Daniel, I will point out to you, he didn't choose to travel in time. He accidentally fell in time.
I will say,
but not talking to his family is a fair point.
I will say, Daniel, that I respect your opinion, but I also respectfully disagree. I like Nero. I like it when he says, "Hello, Christopher." I'm here for that.
Daniel has thank you so much, Daniel. Daniel did a lot of super chats here. We have a couple of them here.
Yeah.
So we're just going to go through the Daniel section of this podcast. Thank you so much, Daniel, for watching. Daniel says, Boyega was screwed, especially if you read the book about Finn set before it. His best friend is the one that died in his arms. He should have sought revenge on Poe, then forgave him and joined later. Now, I don't know what this book is, but I have heard about that before, that the stormtrooper that puts the blood across Finn's face was his best friend. I don't know about this book, though.
I don't know either. And my hot take on tie-ins is that if it's a tie-in to a movie franchise or a television franchise or a video game franchise, the original source material should be able to stand on its own without tie-ins. So maybe you're right, and that story should have been integrated. But if it was so powerful, then I don't understand why it wouldn't have been integrated into the script. I mean, I think Finn suffers from a lot of bad writing over the course of these movies, unfortunately.
Daniel, that story.
Yeah. Daniel Vakura says something that Ashley echoed earlier. Ben Skywalker in the expanded universe made sense, not Ben Solo. I actually 100% agree. Trisha, how much do you know about Jason and Jaina Solo?
Not a lot. Inform me.
So Jason and Jaina Solo are Han Solo and Leia's first kids. They are twins. Han and Leia also have a third kid who they name Anakin. Anakin wants nothing to do with the Jedi. He just wants to be a pilot. Whereas Jason and Jaina are all about the Jedi stuff. But what happens is that Jason turns to the dark side, just like Darth Vader. He's one of actually Luke's first students. So they
took a lot of him for Kylo Ren.
When you look at Kylo Ren, they took a lot from Jason Solo.
Okay.
So, but I agree with you, Jason. Ben, I don't think his name was Ben. I'm pretty certain his name was Jason Skywalker.
It's Jason Skywalker. Do Luke and what's her name have a kid?
They do.
Is that who Ben is?
Ben Skywalker is Luke's kid.
What's her name?
Mara Jade.
Thank you. The Sith that he has a child with.
So this is all non-canon.
This is all non-canon,
now, extended.
And Daniel Vakura kicking out, closing out, being the best fan out here, says a fundamental problem with The Force Awakens, I assume, is that it's jarring to go from Return of the Jedi to The Force Awakens with back to the status quo. The Forced Order, as the enemy was lazy. Give me alien stormtroopers and multiple factions like in Legacy. Now that's going back to my point that I said. It's funny, after I watched The Rise of Skywalker, I remember I had a conversation with Ashley because I told her all the elements of the movie. And I said, one plot thread that I was surprised that we didn't see anywhere in the sequel trilogy is some feeling of the droid armies out there, because they're not destroyed at the end of Revenge of the Sith. They're just turned off. So somewhere there has to be a planet where there are billions and billions and billions of battle droids. And that might have been an interesting plot thread if you had like the First Order being like, hey, we instantly get 5 billion new soldiers if we just go to this planet and turn them all on.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Because they don't explain who the First Order is at all.
No, I think they do a really bad job. There's a lot of scenes I noticed in this time of Force Awakens that are like, we got to tell you all the backstory. And I'm like, oh, this is not.
Exposition's tough.
Yeah.
It's really tough.
We have a couple more questions here. Daniel Vercura, again, kicking ass with these super chats. Thank you, Daniel. Luke is also my favorite character.
Yeah.
I felt bad for Hamill, who was critical of the role at Celebration in 2016. That was true. I'm just glad I have the expanded universe. I still don't get how big the big three were never in a scene together.
So he says something really smart here that I really appreciate, where he says, I'm just glad I have the EU. Yes, because you as a fan can build whatever canon you want.
Make your own continuity.
Jason and Jaina still live in my head canon. Yep. It doesn't matter. And that's the most powerful, I don't want to say weapon because that's violent. The most powerful tool that you have as a fan is you only have to invest in and believe what matters most. And all the stuff that happens that you don't like doesn't matter.
Trisha, I'd love to ask you a question here. Is it a missed opportunity that we never had a scene in these movies of Luke, Leia, and Han together again?
A missed opportunity? Sure. I mean, I think lots and lots of people would have loved to have seen what that looks like. I don't know what story purpose that would have driven forward or how they would have incorporated it.
It would have driven sales, Trisha.
Claim. But I mean, as an OG fan, would it have been cool to see? Absolutely. But I do think that unless they had a very good reason to put them all together, there would have been a lot of grumpy critics out there saying like, just fan service, completely unnecessary. You know what I mean?
I believe in my heart and soul that had our goddess and savior, Carrie Fisher, lived to the end of the production of these movies, instead of gone up to having to watch over all of us, they would have contrived a reason for the three of them to be Force ghosts or
I think so.
in Jedi heaven or limbo or whatever. We would have seen the three of them together.
We have a final question here, and that's a great question from YouTube here, from Ryan Harris, who says, if you could pick a character in the new trilogy to take to a cocktail party about Star Wars, who would you bring? Love to see you all live. West Coast Avengers, dun, 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 which is an in-joke. But I think the idea of going to a cocktail party with one of these characters is genius. Trisha, who would you pick?
Definitely Rey. I would bring Rey. I love Daisy Ridley. I think she's so charming. So I guess it depends why you're going to said cocktail party. Like if I'm going to said cocktail party to like pick up some dudes that know about Star Wars, Rey, my girl. But yeah, it depends why you're going to the cocktail party. But I also think as someone who never knew she was Force sensitive, never knew she had powers, and then discovered it, would be a real interesting over cocktails conversation.
Ashley, who are you going to cocktails with?
I'm really tempted actually to say Maz Kanata because she runs a bar.
Yeah.
So she can probably I don't drink grown-up drinks anymore because I'm not fun. But she can probably make some really incredible drinks.
Sure.
And she probably has some great stories. Plus the goggles are fun. Jason?
Oh, this is a difficult question, man.
Right.
Because to me, yeah, Maz Kanata's a great choice. I think Poe's a great choice.
Well, I think that depends on what movie you're taking Poe from. Because for me, Poe is diminishing returns.
Fair. This is tough. I'm going to go with Admiral Akbar, old Admiral Akbar, just because I want to hear the war stories.
Oh my God.
That'd be
cool. A lot of them. Also, he'd be able to look towards the best shrimp.
I also want to add to my pull for Rey.
Totally.
This is just a show and tell excuse, but
yeah.
Oh.
I also want to add because then if you get too inebriated, you have a great staff to lean on.
It's so funny that you brought that out, because I was going to say before we wrapped everything up completely that when we saw Trisha at the WonderCon after
I meant to share that picture.
Force Awakens, Trisha does an amazing Rey cosplay. So if you haven't scrolled back through her Instagram feed and checked that out, I highly recommend it.
There is a picture of the three of us with Trisha as Rey. We'll have to share it. We'll have to share it. Yeah.
I wasn't so inspired by this movie to do a Rey cosplay, which is normally how I decide I want to do cosplays. But I want to say, I'm trying to get my timeline correct, but I know when I did my Peggy Carter cosplay, because Agent Carter, I was obsessed with that series. When I did my Peggy Carter cosplay, everyone was like, she looks like Daisy Ridley. You look like Daisy Ridley. You look like Daisy Ridley. And I was not aware that that was a thing. When I smile really big, my eyes squint up, and she has a similar type of like really big smile for that. So at that point I was like, cool, I guess I'm doing a Rey. I love Star Wars. Let's do a Rey.
Nice
to this day.
Too.
And it's not all the time. It's like certain angles on a really good day with the right lighting.
Well, you have some nice pictures out in the desert where the illusion is real.
Yes. We did have one final question slip under the wire, but it's very short, so I want to throw it in there. And then that is it, because we have kept the amazing Trisha away from her Tatooine home for too long. Beatmaster, says, do you think George Lucas, would have delivered a better trilogy? I would love to take this first, if you don't mind. Yes and no. I think George Lucas would have given us a trilogy that is much different, way different than what we saw. But as we saw with the prequels, George is not the best executor of his ideas. So I'll be honest with you. I would have rather that George maybe given them the scripts or helped co-write the scripts, but the same directors made all three movies.
Yeah, I feel similarly. I wish he'd been in the room, or he'd been a consultant, because he's a consultant on
Clone Wars.
And I believe he was on Rebels as well, or Dave Filoni went and chatted with him when they made Rebels, and those are my two favorite Star Wars things. So George is like allspice. You want a little bit of it, but too much is overwhelming the palate.
George is like allspice. That's my new favorite. Thank you for that, Ashley.
You're welcome.
Trisha, do you think George Lucas would have made a better trilogy than this trilogy?
No, we saw George Lucas's trilogy.
That's fair.
I love the world he created. I think you're right. I think some combination of maybe George delivering the source material and then other people rounding it out or smoothing the edges. I think that the dialogue was written a lot more naturally in the sequels than George normally delivers. So there's like you said, there are lovely strengths to having George involved for sure. Dave Filoni is such a wonderful resource. Just put him on everything Star Wars from now on. But yeah, I would not want to see just a straight George trilogy, because I feel like that was the prequels.
No. And I think that's a perfect way to end our Star Wars live stream, the Geek History Lesson first summer movie club. Trisha, thank you so much for joining us. Please tell everybody that's watching this and everybody that will be listening to this podcast later where they can find you on the internet so they can stalk down these pictures of Rey.
Oh, man. Well, if you, depending what platform you like, if you are Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter person, I am at that girl Trish with no I in the girl. So it's just that GRL Trish, which, is like right here. But then on YouTube and Twitch, I am Trisha Hershberger, which is just my full name, all one word. I'm probably most active on Twitch and Instagram, but I do pay attention to all the different platforms. And I've given the shelter in place requirements, I've recently been posting a little bit more content to my YouTube than I have in a while. So I try to give love to all the platforms, but there's so many of them.
There's too many.
Yeah, the only one I'm like legit blind eyeing is TikTok.
Oh, girl,
us
me
too.
too.
I'm just gonna pretend you don't exist, because not only am I not like a musical comedian, Like that's not really what I do. I also just don't know that I have the creative energy to spread myself just a little bit thinner for another platform.
Yeah, we feel the same way. Everyone out there listening, watch us. Don't forget that you can find Geek History Lesson, the podcast, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, everywhere you put podcasts in the ear holes. That's where you can listen to this episode again in case you didn't watch it live. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Jawin. That's Jawiin. You can follow Ashley on Twitter and Instagram at Ashley V. Robinson.
Follow me. I have less Twitter followers and Instagram followers than either of these people.
Yes. And don't forget to go support our Patreon if you want to listen to more of the podcast at patreon.com/Jawin. Trisha, thank you again so much for joining us.
Thank you guys so much for having me. Given everything that's so crazy in the world right now, this was a wonderful breath of fresh air.
This was a lot of fun. Yeah. Well, everyone out there watching us live and listening to us later, thank you so much for listening to and watching this episode of Geek History Lesson. I am Jason. I still think she's a Kenobi Inman.
I am Ashley Victoria Robinson. And Professor Jason, would you please dismiss the class?
The class and the live stream and the podcast is now dismissed. Bye-bye, everybody.